It is time to take you between the lines. Your host, Eric Edmonson, is getting ready to bring you stats and analysis from around the sporting world with a special guest on 98.7 Roar Radio.
Hello and welcome into our second episode of Between the Lines, the show dedicated to stats and analysis from around the sporting world. As you heard, none of that personal attacks, no hot takes here. We are just about straight up sports talk. So let's go ahead and get into it with our sports headlines kicking us off this afternoon. Jimmy Butler is being suspended for a third time after missing practice again. Butler, disgruntled superstar with the Miami Heat. Obviously, trade deadline's coming up. Of course, he might be looking for a new home. I know he's very much pushing for it. Thus, him getting suspended again makes perfect sense. Moving into the NFL world, lots of general manager hires and lots of head coaching hires, or general manager firings and head coaching hirings. The Jets have hired former coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Aaron Glenn, on the heels of Ben Johnson getting hired by the Chicago Bears. But Glenn, new role with the Jets. Big introductory press conference from him. And the Jaguars have stolen Liam Cohen away from Tampa Bay. Also, Jaguars firing Trent Baalke, which a lot of analysts were very surprised about because, Baalke's had a home there for a long time, but he's come under fire for just poor mismanagement in that team. Pete Carroll has come out of retirement, surprisingly, to coach the Raiders, staying in a division with the Harbaughs, keeping a rivalry with them. And, of course, we have our Super Bowl contenders as we talk about our first topic of the afternoon. The Eagles ran over the Commanders, 55 points scored. Hurts and Barkley both getting 3 rushing touchdowns. They were fantastic in that affair. Even Jalen Hurts kind of breaking out of that shell he's been in for a couple weeks. So 246 passing yards. Don't necessarily see him do that a lot. Dane Daniels was also good for the Commanders, but it just was not enough. The defense is just not there. And look, when you look at the Commanders, they did well to make it this far. And they shouldn't have made it this far. They were not supposed to be here, right? This was supposed to be a new first year under the new regime, with a good quarterback, a new quarterback that you were hoping was the future. And look, he looks like the future in Washington. I'm sure Commanders fans are very happy to have him in Washington. We'll have to see what Daniels does in his sophomore campaign along with what the Commanders do in the offseason. And I think the Eagles have quietly been an NFC sleeper. I think a lot of the attention has been put on the Detroit Lions, so seeing them in the Super Bowl, not very surprising to me. And in the AFC, it's another heartbreaker for Buffalo. They can't seem to get away from the heartbreakers. They had the entire America rooting against them or rooting for them because America didn't want to see the Chiefs, But listen, this is excellence in motion, folks. This is a dynasty in motion. We are, quite frankly, we're lucky to see it. We might not see this ever again. But Buffalo again comes up short. Was it them versus the refs? Maybe not. We'll talk about that later on. Stay with us on that one. But Mahomes continues to be inevitable and be the nemesis to Josh Allen. We're going to take a quick break here and bring it on back with some more sports talk. But keep it right here. You're listening to Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back into Between the Lines. Eric Edmonson, your host. We're here with you on 98.7 Roar Radio. Getting ready to dive into our first topic of the afternoon, which is the AFC and the NFC championship games. We'll start off with the NFC championship game where...
Fly, Eagles, fly to Super Bowl 59.
That's right. The Eagles are back in the Super Bowl. It is going to be a rematch of a couple years ago between the Chiefs and the Eagles. I said we're going to start off with the NFC championship game, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Look, this was the expected outcome in my opinion. In my eyes, this was the expected outcome, and I said it in the open. Look, Washington, phenomenal season, fun season. Jane Daniels looks like the real deal. You just weren't ready for this stage yet, and that's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of about here for the Washington Commanders. Listen, you finally got a new owner after years and years of ineptitude. That's good for them. You got a new head coach who's been there before, and you got a new quarterback. Like, that's all that Commander fans could wish for. And on top of that, the team decided to deliver them a magical postseason run that unfortunately did end with the Eagles beating them to the tune of 55 points, which, depending on who you are, not a great look. But you know what? 55 points, garbage time against, an NFC Titan. I wouldn't be too upset about that if I were the Commanders, because, again, no one expected you to be here. You outperformed every expectation. But the Eagles remain one of the best teams, one of the most overlooked teams because of how good Detroit was this year. I think they were very overlooked in the NFC. And I think the entire National Football League needs to, if you don't like Philadelphia, then you need to get on the Giants. The New York Giants did not re-sign Barkley. Instead, he goes to Philadelphia and has one of the greatest running back seasons ever. And he continues in the playoffs. The first play out of scrimmage for the Eagles, 60 yards to the house. Saquon Barkley, man, 3 tutties on the day, 118 rushing yards. The guy is crazy, and he's hungry. He finally gets to win. It was quoted that when he went to Philadelphia, his daughter asked, "Is Daddy gonna win? Does that mean Dad's gonna win now?" He's winning. He's in the Super Bowl. He's got his championship so far. He's on to more things because he'll be facing one of the best teams that we have seen in a very long time, ever, really, in the Kansas City Chiefs. But he's going to be facing a tough contest, and then we'll get to that in a little while. But again, Saquon Barkley was unmatched in this contest, which 55 points I mentioned multiple times. It's the most a team has scored in a conference championship game since the 1970 merger. A.J. Brown was also in the mix of things. 96 yards and a touchdown for Brown. Look, that duo of Smith and Brown is fantastic. That's a great wideout duo. And even Jalen Hurts. I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts fan, but he had 3 rushing touchdowns, 246 passing yards. That's the most since Week 14 for him. So he had himself one heck of a game as well. Granted, it was against a Commanders' shoddy defense, but you know what? I can forgive that a little bit because, it is what it is. It happens. And like I said, I don't think that Washington was prepared for this stage, and that's okay. But we've talked about that ad nauseum at this point. But what we haven't talked about is the continued dominance of this Eagles defense. Oh, my goodness. Ranked top of the league at the end of the season. I think their only lacking category really is rushing, where they're kind of more middle of the pack. But the pass defense is fantastic. The overall defense is great. And again, Jaden Daniels is his best. Just wasn't enough. They have Philly's defense, even facing a red-hot QB like Jaden Daniels, has only allowed 5 touchdowns in the playoffs. 3 on passing, 2 on the rush. And that's coming off a season where they just only allowed 17.8 points a game. So if you want to round it up, 18 points a game. This defense is fantastic, but they have to show up against the Dynasty. Let's talk about the AFC game. We know the history between these two squads. The Bills, the Chiefs. It's not necessarily a rivalry if one team keeps on winning, and that's exactly what Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs have done against Buffalo. But this year felt different. This year felt so much different. Allen had an MVP year. He might lose it to Lamar Jackson, but he had an MVP year. And he had beaten the Chiefs in the regular season pretty well, too. And this is a relatively weak Chiefs team. From what we've seen in the past, this is a weak Chiefs team. They're very injured, which injuries are not their fault. But even performances on the field during the regular season, the Chiefs were not at the top of their game, it seemed like. They were enough at the top of their game to only lose 2 games, one of them being a blowout in the last game of the year where they, rested starters. The other being to Buffalo. In Buffalo. And I do think Arrowhead had a big contributing factor here, because anytime you got to go to somebody else's house, it's going to be dangerous, right? But that first drive definitely showed us that maybe there were some nerves. Maybe there were some nerves from Josh Allen because he just could not perform on that first one. And you know what? The Chiefs answered back. They answered back completely with a drive of their own to go up, and then 14 unanswered points after that from the Chiefs. And that's where you get to see a lot of the big players for Kansas City. It's not just Mahomes. It's not even Kelsey, who has not been great in the playoffs. He wasn't even good in the regular season this year. He had a couple of receptions. He did have a couple drops, too, in that game on Sunday. But Xavier Worthy had one heck of a night, and it continued. That one of those 14 points, where 7 of them were scored by him on their uncontested run. But the Bills' defense stepped it up coming out of the half, coming out of the locker room, and it gave Buffalo a chance to sneak a lead change in. And it felt like every single lead change and every single touchdown that the Bills got, they had to scrape for. They had to go for a real gutsy 4th down call. They had to make some insurmountable odds. They had to do this, that, and the other. The Chiefs were making it look easy and effortless. It just shows what type of, it's not of who's been there before. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that it shows where these two teams are in their state right now. You know, Buffalo is trying to get the monkey off the back. Kansas City's trying to go for a three-peat. It just definitely shows you what difference we have between the two squads. But back to the game. Buffalo, after scoring that touchdown to steal the lead, they went for a 2-point conversion, which did not go their way. And I think that was another big point of the night. You know, they went 0-2 on 2-point conversions instead of taking the extra point. Now, was it a good decision in the moment? I think so. Of course, everything's 20/20 in hindsight. Would you love to have those points at the end of the game? Yeah, but even if they're not going to win you that game, it would have been 32-31. It would have been very close. So I understand at the moment, everything's hindsight and everything's 20/20 in hindsight. Completely understand that. And here's where things get a little tricky. 4th quarter, and you have the 4th and 1 call. You have the 4th and short. And this is something that was a theme all game long with Buffalo, is that they were just short. They were just short of the first down multiple times. And was Josh Allen through? I don't know. It's a very hard call, especially for us who are not on the field. We're watching on the TV, and I don't know if you can, that sort of play. I don't know if you can clearly freeze frame and say, he was over. He was definitely over, guys. That's a very tough call to make. I understand that. There has to be some way to figure it out, though, from the officials. It can't just be a judgment call, but that's on the NFL. That's not necessarily on the officials. On the NFL to innovate. Let's get chips in the ball or something, be able to figure out where that first down is physically on the field. Have some cameras made for that or something or other. I know they have that in tennis. Complete non sequitur there. Just went off the rails a little bit. But again, the refs were a little bit against Buffalo tonight or on Sunday night. That's, you know what? It adds to the narrative. I'm not going to say that the refs beat the Bills. I'm really not going to say that because I don't think that there was anything that was super against the Bills. It was relatively, I think, a cleanly officiated game apart from those couple of oopsies, we'll call them as of right now. But here's the thing. The narrative of the Chiefs always having a leg up on everybody continues, Since 2021, playoff opponents have faced 66 penalties to 36 Kansas City penalties in the playoffs. And those 66 penalties that the opponents have faced have been for 541 yards to 319 for the Chiefs. And Chiefs get the better side of coin flip calls or judgment calls that are made by the officials. Listen, are the Chiefs paying the refs or are they cheating? Absolutely not. They're not doing that, but it's something that is an ongoing conversation with the NFL and the refs to clarify. The Chiefs' offense is still potent. Patrick Mahomes, he goes from rushing 19 yards in the regular season a game to 28 in the playoffs this year. He's a different animal. He's going to start running all over the field again. And, Buffalo had a chance to come back into this game, but once they turned the ball over to the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City did their magic. They burned the rest of the clock and punched their ticket to the Super Bowl again. We're going to take a break and welcome in Simon Johnstone next up. But first, I do want to share some audio. Maybe it's some catharsis. This is courtesy of Barstool, one of their shows, is a distraught Bills fan. We have edited it due to some colorful language. But after this, we'll take it to a break and keep it right here on Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University.
I need them to win a championship for me to feel good. And how many times do me, my friends, all these group chats I'm in with my boys, right? How many firsts do we have to go before we do this? I sent them all a text. I'm done. Put my bag and give it to Goodwill. because I can invest my time in some other that is going to make me feel better about myself and my life.
Welcome back into Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio. Eric Edmonson, your host, here with you, and with me is our special guest this afternoon, Simon Johnstone. Simon, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Eric. Happy to be here.
Good. So, both of us football fans, both of us watched those conference games. That's what we were talking about earlier on the show, and you know what? This is the Super Bowl of the powerhouses, kind of, but it's not the one that people kind of wanted.
Yeah, if you chalked, looking at the bracket going into the playoffs, you probably would end up with these two teams, maybe Lions, since they were just so dominant in the last two regular seasons, but still struggling to perform in the postseason. And I don't love the matchup. I don't think many do in the world of, getting those exciting teams. You want the Bills to finally cross the threshold, make their way back into a Super Bowl. You want to see a rookie like Jaden Daniels, see what he can do on the biggest stage in the realm of football. But we do get, like you said, the two best teams. So if you're looking for a great football game, we definitely got that coming in February.
Hopefully it's a great football game. I mean, last time these two matched up, it really just felt like the Chiefs were just walking right to it. The Eagles just had nothing that first half of that game. And really, I feel like, and not to, speak bad on the Super Bowl, but I really feel like we're in for maybe the most boring 3 quarters of football going into the Super Bowl, because it just feels like both these teams, they don't perform well until, the second half starts.
Well, look, I mean, you can take the NFC Championship game as a very minute sample size for the Eagles, and they put up 55 points against the Commanders. Now, the Commanders, who beat the number 1 seed Lions, I didn't expect that type of scoreline to come across. The Commanders did their job on offense, 35, usually enough to push them over the edge. But when it came to the Eagles, I mean, their offense, when you have players like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and, of course, now you're with Saquon Barkley this year, it's just a whole nother element of their offense that's so hard to strategize against.
Yeah, the Commanders will be back. They had a rough they weren't supposed to be here in the first place, but they will be back. So speaking of the conference games, in the NFC, you said that, it was kind of cut and dry, and I think a lot of people kind of saw this coming. The only thing that the Commanders really had coming in for them was that they were red hot, and Jaden Daniels remained red hot. Like I said, I think they are going to be back. But, it's a kind of an inevitable force that the Eagles were. They have so much talent on their side. But in the AFC, it's another 50-50 flip and another game that, some people are going to cry out rough ball.
Yeah, and honestly, it was just Mahomes did his job. Yes, there were some moments, I think, that could have gone the other way. But I think the moment that a lot of people will continue to bring up, and it's a very good counter-argument with questionable reffing decisions, is Dalton Kincaid's drop. That was a crucial moment in the game that would have kept them alive, would have given them a chance to take the lead. Dropping that where Josh Allen had an insanely athletic play
throw
to keep that play alive, able to release it, give him even a chance to put his hands on the ball. Wasn't able to do so, drop the ball. And then, of course, if you let Mahomes be the one to try and close out a game, it's just one of those situations where you feel like it's almost a moot point.
Yeah, and I was looking this up, and I mentioned this on the show previously before we threw it to break, but Mahomes really becomes a different animal in the playoffs. I mean, this season, granted, Mahomes has never really had a dominant regular season, but especially this year, he was not dominant, and he only rushed 19 yards per game in the regular season. In the postseason to this year, 28 yards, nearly 10+ yards a game. And I don't understand why every team, they see this, and this is not a 1-year thing. Mahomes does this every year, where he has a lot more time to scramble once the ball is snapped in the playoffs. Why they don't do anything about it? Because he's going to lead a 20-yard dash at any point in the game.
Yeah, and the Chiefs are really smart in utilizing Mahomes, especially in the postseason. I mean, this is one of those years they're really low in terms of talent pool on their receiving core. I mean, you still have Travis Kelce, who's had a lower year. Noah Gray's been a great addition to them on the tight end side. Xavier Worthy with him coming back, Pacheco with his return. These are pieces that they missed throughout the whole season, but still got the job done. And then Mahomes, when the lights are the brightest, does bring his best game, and I think that's just what's shining through consistently in these playoff performances.
And a QB that continues to shine the brightest when the lights are on him is Josh Allen. He has not gotten it done in the playoffs. Sometimes you can maybe say it's on him, but a lot of the times, especially Sunday night, I can't say that it was on him, but it's just, what does he have to do to get over this hump that is Kansas City?
It's really starting to become a front office issue, I think. Josh Allen needs those pieces. He had Diggs. They reached another AFC Championship game when he was on the roster, but it's hard to perform. I mean, the fact that they had the record they had, they got to the AFC Championship game with players like Mac Hollins as their primary receiver one, Kincaid, who's a solid and formidable tight end. You have options, but compared to people like Xavier Worthy, compared to Isaiah Pacheco, I mean, they just have that one level above. And for Josh Allen, who's comparable to Mahomes, he needs that star to bounce off of on the offensive end.
And I thought that they were going to get a lot of stars. Like, I thought that they would have a lot of emerging stars. Obviously, they got rid of Diggs after some issues in last postseason and the regular season. So they got rid of stuff on Diggs. This kind of felt like a big step up. And like you said, Matt Collins was fantastic this year. He was really good. So was Cole. And I think in the MVP of this game, although Josh Allen did his best, it was Cook. Cook was the one making those plays. Of course, that incredible goal line stretch on fourth down to get them through the threshold to get a tutty. But not giving him the ball in the final drive when he had solved the defense all night was very questionable to me. I get Josh Allen's your guy, MVP year. You know, it's a toss up between him and Lamar. Honestly, I think Lamar's going to win it. But look, Josh Allen had an MVP year. Got to give the ball to Cook, in my opinion. There.
Yeah, I think they almost simplified the game plan too much. It's hard to scheme against these top-level quarterbacks like Josh Allen, like Patrick Mahomes, especially with the play calling that both of these offenses bring out. But like you said, James Cook, not only just a great playoff performance, he's had a great season. I mean, he's taken a huge jump this year. Mm-hmm. He's really diversified and given Josh Allen freedom to go for some more rushing touchdowns, to utilize his arm because they can run some play action rather than what they've been dealing with before with a less than formidable running back. So James Cook has definitely added a dimension when it comes to their offense, but I still think it was the right play to keep it in Allen's hands. You have to trust your guy. You know what he can do. Yeah, get maybe on a first down, run it, but overall, I think it was the right play.
Yeah, and one final thing before we move on to our next little topic. I think the Bills, like you said, it is a front office issue. I don't think their lack of offensive weapons. I think they need to go in on some defense, whether that be picking the most defensive-minded guy out of the draft or going to get a high defensive guy in free agency. They're middle of the pack in defense every single year, and that's just not going to cut it when you're trying to compete with the Super Bowl, especially in the AFC, because you know you're going to run into the Chiefs. You have to get some sort of run stoppage game. So moving to the next topic, we briefly talked about it when you first came on, Simon, about this Super Bowl. We've seen this before, just in a different city. Eagles and Chiefs. Eagles, one of the more, I honestly want to say quietly dominant, because the NFC, kind of the shine all year has been on the Lions, and the Eagles have been not right there with them, but they've been just steadily winning games. Obviously, the big story out of Philadelphia this year has been the addition of Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, over 2,000 rushing yards, almost broke his record, but actually sat out in the last week, and he decided to give that. Well, Nick Sirianni gave him the opportunity, and he's a good enough person to say, hey, let the young guys eat, is what he said, and it's just another reason why I'm a fan of Saquon Barkley. But yeah, Eagles overall, like you said, have been a fairly consistent team in the regular season. They had a few stumbles here and there throughout it, but especially towards the latter end of the year, I mean, they've just continued performance. Their offense really started to connect. We saw a little bit of drama between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, little air quotes on the word drama.
Right.
But they were trying to reconnect. Now that connection's really firing again. You still have Devontae Smith on the go route. You know what he can do in the open field. And then, of course, when you have to think about all of that, little handoff to Saquon Barkley, he can break open for 60 yards. That offense it's so dimensional on so many different levels that it's going to be a really big question mark to see what Kansas City can do defensively come February.
Yeah, and in the past defense game, Kansas City has not been, top of the pack. They're still good. They're still good. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not, they're not upper echelon like they are when it comes to stopping the rush, which they are, I believe, top 3. They were ranked at the end of the regular season as top 3 in stopping and rushing. But Saquon's a different animal. But also, I don't know how far Jalen Hurts can carry the Eagles. Listen, I'm not a Jalen Hurts guy. I think he's a fine quarterback. He might be a Super Bowl winner caliber quarterback. He's not a Super Bowl MVP. He's not an MVP level quarterback from what he's seen. Heck, 246 yards last time out. That's the most we've seen from him since week 14. And he did it against, not to speak ill of the Commanders because they made it that far, but this is a Commanders defense that was not ready to face an NFC Titan.
Yeah, the Commanders have consistently given up a lot of points. They're not a strong defensive team. They're good against the rush, but outside of that, we saw Saquon over 100 yards, right? So even there on that area, they weren't the best defensive team. And like you said, to your point, Jalen Hurts hasn't been the best thing, but we're starting to see these conversations almost revolving like we saw with the 49ers just a year ago. the system is more what is helping drive this offense rather than the quarterback. They were saying, oh, you can plug in nearly 20 other quarterbacks where Brock Purdy was just 1 year ago, and they can bring themselves to the Super Bowl. We're starting to see that conversation because we saw with McNeese, and Kenny Pickett. Both of them led their teams to a win with the exact same offense. So you start to think, Jalen Hurts is a fantastic quarterback. Top 15 in the league, without a doubt. But is he an X factor? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. And the most important thing to Jalen Hurts' game is not his arm. It's never been his arm. It's been his legs. And before they got Saquon, he was a good bit of their rush game. But, having Saquon now, I mean, they got each other. They matched each other with 3 rushing touchdowns against the Commanders. Now, is the game plan in New Orleans going to be give Jalen Hurts the ball to run? No. But I'm sure that it will come into play eventually, as will the quarterback scramble for the Chiefs. Well, Simon, thank you for coming on this afternoon. Anything to plug on your way out?
Oh, just a podcast that'll be hitting both Spotify and Apple Music. Tennis Talks with Simon, speaking about mental health revolving around the coach's actions and the team.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. That's Simon Johnstone. Make sure you check out Tennis Talks with Simon on your her podcast networks. We're going to throw it to one more quick break, then take you out of here and get you on with the rest of your day. You're listening to Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back, everybody. Just quickly want to send you out of here and make sure you enjoy the rest of your week. Make sure you tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a friend of me that you were Between the Lines. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in this week on Between the Lines. Tune in next week for another great guest and another great show. Check out the show on Instagram and YouTube at EOTC Between the Lines. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, make good decisions, watch sports, and as always, have a good one.